Hello, welcome to ONTIC's Connected Intelligence Podcast. I'm Fred Burton, ONTIC's Executive Director of Protective Intelligence. This podcast offers valuable insights and practical advice to help you navigate the complexities of modern corporate security shared by leaders and innovators in the field. Now, on to the discussion. Hi, I'm Fred Burton, here today with Joshua Skule. Josh is a nationally recognized security and intelligence expert and the founder and CEO of Bowwave LLC, a Washington, D.C. based security firm. He retired from the FBI after a 21-year career, most recently serving as Executive Assistant Director for Intelligence, where he led the Bureau's Global Intelligence Program, a 5,000-person workforce and a $3 billion national intelligence budget. Previously, he held senior leadership roles in the FBI's Counterterrorism Division and later served as Senior Vice President of Risk Advisory and Consulting Services at Allied Universal, a U.S. Naval Academy graduate and former U.S. Marine captain. Josh is a frequent media commenter on national security issues and a recipient of the Presidential Rank Award for Meritorious Service. Josh, welcome to the ONTIC Connected Intelligence Podcast.
Thanks for having me. Look forward to our conversation, Fred.
Me too. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your background. How did you get into this business?
So it's been a crazy journey. I spent 6 years in the Marine Corps, and then the first half of my FBI career in Chicago, working public corruption, violent crime, gangs, drugs, phenomenal people and time and team in Chicago. And then I went into the national security side, working counterterrorism, and then ultimately, as you said, became the chief of intelligence for the FBI. Post-career, I spent almost 2 years at Allied Universal, helping them stand up their risk advisory and consulting division, and then established Bowwave with my longtime friend, colleague, classmate, Dan Zanitas, who's a retired Navy SEAL.
That's awesome. And after spending 2 decades in the Bureau, and I look back on my time working with the Bureau back in the 80s and early 90s, what moments or assignments most shaped how you think about intelligence and national security today?
I think it's the entire journey. It's not just one particular assignment. There was certainly impactful people, colleagues, subordinates along the way that helped challenge the way I led, helped challenge the way I thought about things, diverse perspectives on issues, learning to mature your thought processes. All of that, I think, encompassed how I like to go forward. I mean, when I reflect back on the most impact on my career, it has always been about the group of people around me and how they either challenged me, I challenged them, how they had diversity of thought, approached problem sets differently, to include how folks thought about intelligence, both at the tactical and strategic level.
Yeah, that's a great point. And that kind of leads me into my next question here. How did you balance tactical intelligence needs with long-term strategic priorities? Priorities, I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's really, really hard. You have to service the here and now in intelligence and make sure that in the FBI that cases are getting addressed and that folks are supporting those investigations, which really is the grassroots. I mean, if you looked at the military and the grassroots of any, in the Marine Corps who's not getting service and not getting information and intelligence to shape a battle, that would be that would be a failure. And so, but at the same time, you have to have an element dedicated to looking over the horizon and challenging conventional wisdom and making sure that they're using all the resources to help shape how an organization thinks about the future. You have to make sure those resources are free to think about things in a different way and are not intertwined into the day-to-day operations of tactics. Strategy, much, much harder.
Yeah, for sure. I know watching the development of the Joint Terrorism Task Forces back in the day was really visionary at the time from the Bureau's perspective, and a lot of great work that was done there. And I know intelligence is often described as both an art and a science. How did you foster analytical rigor while still encouraging critical thinking and judgment?
Well, I think you have to have critical thinking in the intelligence game. You have to challenge conventional norms. You have to understand or help folks understand, are they thinking about everything in the way that it should be thought about, and challenging those assessments. I think is something that has to happen. As a part of that, analysts have a very rigorous process to drawing those conclusions that allows them to come to provide critical analysis, both at strategy level and the tactical level. I think you have to be able to pull in all the available resources. And then one of the things I really came to appreciate was the peer review, as well as having seniors challenge the way folks were thinking about it, because sometimes the processes, the way individuals process things, is very different. And so it is a yeah, I would agree. An art and a science, and making sure that you had the rigor to develop the conclusions you came to, but also had the freedom of thought to think about things very differently outside of the box.
Josh, I know we had a lot of silos in Washington, previously, like before the first World Trade Center bombing in 93. And obviously that changed, the world changed after 9/11. But how did you approach breaking down silos between intelligence, investigations, and operations? And obviously dealing with the interagency community.
I would also add in an additional aspect to that, and that's the private sector, which really became more embraced in my over the last few years. I was in the FBI and continued, obviously, well after I left. And when you look at today's threats and what's happening, there is a dearth of information that's in the private sector, and government agencies have to embrace them because they do have the information. They are facing grave economic threat in some of these organizations, and how to combat nation state activity. It's not easy to take a tactical intelligence product, make sure that it doesn't impede or threaten what would be a potentially covert investigation. You're pulling the kernels out to make sure others are informed, and that could be across the intelligence community, across state, local, federal law enforcement, into the private sector. The analysts in today's world are really stretched in that regard of how to think about those things. And then you have to be open to the fact that not everything is for everybody. And I know that in today's world, everybody thinks that they should know everything about a particular issue. And the fact remains that's just fundamentally not true. That's how you jeopardize sources and methods.
Right, for sure. And after retiring from the bureau, you moved into the private sector with Allied, great company, as we know. What was the biggest mindset shift in that transition? I know it was tough on me when I transitioned out of the government.
It's different. I would say that the probably the biggest challenge for me was shifting from a budget to a P&L, profits and loss, and understanding that resources cost differently and are accounted for differently in a private sector company than they are in the government. In the government, a lot of organizations, you can quote unquote throw people at a problem to help solve that. In the private sector, that costs a lot of money. And I'll use an example. I mean, looking to somebody that was potentially a threat to a private sector entity. They had identified a subject and could not get law enforcement engaged and wanted to put him under surveillance. In the bureau, that is a relatively routine operation to put somebody under long time surveillance over a period of weeks. In the private sector, that is very, very costly, and so it really has to balance for them the risk.
Yeah, that's a good point. What do you think private sector security leaders most misunderstand about how government intelligence actually works?
I don't know if there's a misunderstanding. I think between the two, I think that their continued dialogue is essential to understanding um, what is each other's missions and how the threats impact an industry in the private sector. I think often people, in the private sector think of the government as a monolith, and that's just all supposed to be working under one head, and it's just not the case. consequently, not everything that is germane to a government mission and the threat intelligence picture is germane to every industry in the private sector, and so it becomes a balance. And in my time, in my last couple of years, my post in the FBI, the Office of Private Sector reported to me, and that is just the FBI's engagement primarily with the Fortune 500 chief security officers and out of DSAC. And it was really enlightening to hear from some of those thoughtful leaders on what was their biggest need from me in the information sharing. And that's what we focused on, information sharing. How do we share information in a way that helps, frankly, protect the United States and our economic vitality? And how do we in the government make sure that they have information that is needed to, whether it's physical or the virtual, the cyber threats, how do we get that information to them in a way that they can action it? Consequently, it the FBI making requests of the private sector to make sure that we had that information, and the impediments to both of those things are real. The government is dealing with highly classified information at times and trying to get that to the folks that need to do it. Consequently, private sector industries are dealing with sometimes proprietary information that could really jeopardize their economic vitality. And so you'll see folks get very reluctant to share that with anybody, and for good reason. But those were some meaningful conversations. And how do we get to a solution that makes us both happy? Not an easy conversation at all.
No, not at all. I can remember one day, our director, we received some threat report from somebody. I don't know if it was from the bureau or the agency or whomever, and he said, you can't provide us with intelligence information and expect us not to use it. And I know that in the government, we struggled with that at times, and in the private sector, with the creation of the State Department OSAC and so forth, they did a really good job and still do, with the dissemination of threat information to the private sector.
Absolutely. There's a host of information sharing entities that have been created in the last decade plus that really should enable not just the threat reporting, because the threat reporting is only valuable if it's timely, and folks can do something about that. To your point on somebody's sharing information and saying, don't expect us not to do something about it. Same thing happens in the government. You get a piece of highly classified information in a sometimes in a bigot list. And I've had multiple conversations in the interagency where I can't, you can't tell me a threat inside the United States and then expect me not to act on it. It's very,
Right.
I have to do that. I mean, I have to keep, and frankly, you want me to do that. So now you have to give me the information in a way that I can use it. You can share a greater amount of information so long as there's a portion of that that I can share with the folks that are out there trying to stop bad things from happening.
Hey everyone, Fred here. If you're enjoying this conversation, take a moment to rate and review the Connected Intelligence podcast on your favorite listening platform. Your support helps us grow and bring even more insightful discussions to your ears. Also, don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Now, let's get back to the conversation. Josh, how should organizations think about the convergence of physical security, cyber threats, insider risk, and geopolitical instability?
Wow, that those are all very, very broad, difficult topics to tackle. It's a They're all intertwined and often tackled separately. So with the physical risk, I think over the last several years, there's been an emphasis on cyber and the virtual risk for good reason. There's so many more threats. However, as we've seen over the last year, the amount of active shooters, threats to senior leaders in the private sector, um, and others, really has brought, I think, the physical threats back into some focus. The cyber threat's not going to go away; it's just going to increase. And I think that when you start thinking about where the world is and how we need to react, and really how do we take these threats seriously in a private sector and learn from them? I can feel for some of these senior leaders at on the business side in a corporation trying to fight for their own profits and losses and their quarterly earnings, and how does that work, and securities and overhead function. So how do we do that in a smart way, and how do I as a senior leader engage in a way that allows for thoughtful deployment of resources, so that we can do the best we can. I think sometimes folks will, on the business side, will look at, okay, so if I spend more money, does that reduce my risk to zero? And the answer to that is no. Does it reduce your vulnerabilities, and does it do other things? Absolutely. But you can never say this will never happen. And so, I mean, you unfortunately look at the shooting, at the NFL headquarters in New York City, and there were armed guards in there that were engaged and caught off guard, because I don't think anybody imagined somebody being able to get across that courtyard with a long gun. And I'm not. This is not a judgment on anybody. It's so now. How do we think about this differently, and how long do we think about it? Because again, security for the private sector is a cost. It costs money. So how long, and if nothing bad happens, often you'll see a review, a budget review, especially in lean times. And how do we do this without what we had from a year ago?
Yeah, it's a constant battle with historically kind of feast or famine. But as you and I both know, we've seen government agencies struggle with that as well. I mean, you can
Absolutely.
look at the aftermath of the attempts on the life of President Trump and the Secret Service resource issue, and in general, I mean, every government agency, kind of suffers through that as well, even in the public sector.
I think I think all big entities looking at budgets, how do they allocate funds, all struggle with that. The prioritization, how are we going to do things smarter? How do we take on new missions with if we don't have the money? How do we, parallel, how do we develop new lines of business to become more profitable if we don't have the money? And where are we going to get that money from? Those are real challenges. I agree with you. Governments struggle shifting priorities. They struggle with legacy IT systems, just like large other private sector corporations do. And those turning those big boats is hard. And how do you shape that, except during a crisis? During a crisis, it seems like all the money and people are available, and so I've never figured out how to capture that element, and I don't think you can. You can't run at that pace. But how do you take a look at what we had learned out of that and implement it to go forward? I don't think anybody, public or private, is really good at that.
Yeah, for sure. It's probably worth about 20 or so PhD projects
Yeah,
just to think about.
yeah.
Um, Josh, if you were advising a corporate security or intelligence leader building their program today, where should they focus first?
Oh wow, it's a broad question. I think first you'd have to look at how mature is a practice, a security practice, and before you could make recommendations. Broadly, I think of security in the sense of uh, intelligence first. Okay, what are the threats and what are the bad things we're are trying to happen, and how have we looked at that in a very real way? And then I think you can take the intelligence and information you have from there, and trickle down. Okay, what is our posture? And I think that goes for both cyber and physical threats. And I think the real first step, I think a lot of folks, let me back up. I think a lot of people will throw resources at a problem because something bad happened, and maybe that's not your problem, which then leaves you more vulnerable in a different place. So I think hard to do, especially post crisis, but maybe take a step back, assess the landscape, assess where we're vulnerable, assess where we're willing to take on risk too, because you're never going to cover it all, and then allocate the resources. And I think that has to be somewhat regular. And I don't think that security, either in the virtual or physical, should do that in a vacuum. I think you have to have business leaders involved who are controlling a lot of the purse strings to really understand that and invest. You can't do it every day. So, but a couple times a year, the leaders of a company should be briefed on what the threat posture in that company is.
Yeah, very good point. Now, tell me a little bit about the company you founded.
Oh, Bowwave. So we're a national security services company, which translates into we provide talented people to the government to help them do their mission. We've been in business just over 4 years, had some great partnerships in the government contracting business across the board. And we really enjoy the work we do with the federal clients. And it's exciting. As you know, it's an exciting mission, and that's what drew me back to this business line was the fact that the ability to support national security in a way that's different, and but also being able to motivate the folks that we're hiring, and to tell them in some instances the story and legacy of why they're doing what they're doing. And I think that comes from having some senior posts in the government and being able to talk to our folks of who are who are doing the day to day, and you caught up in the drama and just what you're doing every day, and asking them every now and then get to talk to those oftentimes younger folks, and let me tell the import of how your little world is impacting the greater world and how this big thing comes together. That's a motivation for me. Hopefully it's a motivation for them too. But that's what we're doing. We have a great team. We've hired some really smart and talented people, and we have some great partners across the industry.
That's awesome. Now, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I figure a man with your background can handle this question. We ask every guest this. How would you define connected intelligence, or what does connected intelligence mean to you?
Well, I think connected intelligence comes in a lot of different forms. First is having the systems, but not just the systems, the right information, which is not dissimilar to what we just talked about. Is constant. You have to constant evaluate what is the data that you need. We know that the world is creating more data than ever, and that is every large organization's problem. How do I get through that data? So having that is first and foremost, having the systems and the data. Then you have to have the right people assessing that data in a way that moves at the speed of technology, integrating that data into a platform. And then you have to disseminate it to the people that are going to be able to do something about it. And all of that has to happen in a very seamless fashion, and very timely in order to be effective. It doesn't do anybody good that if you tell them on Wednesday that their house is going to be robbed on Tuesday. And so it is a constant push pull. And then and often then you have to be able to allocate the resources to be able to do that in a way that allows the mission to move. It's not easy, and I don't think it's easy for anybody. I don't think it's easy for a private sector entity to get through their data. I don't think it's easy for a government entity to get through their data, and to be able to integrate. It all costs money, time, and people. And there's always new advancements coming up. And you have to be able to step back on occasion and figure out whether or not what you had connected in the past is still valuable, or whether you need to move to something different.
Very well said. Josh, I really want to thank you not only for your service to our great nation with the Marine Corps, but with the Bureau and what you're doing today. And we really appreciate you being on the ONTIC Connected Intelligence podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. This is a great conversation, Fred.
Thanks for listening in. To find more episodes, visit us at ontic.co/podcasts. Don't forget to rate and subscribe on your streaming platform of choice. Know someone who would be a great podcast guest, or have questions you'd like us to answer? Email us at podcast@ontic.co. This episode was produced by AJ McKeon, and I'm Fred Burton. Thanks for listening.